It's an experience that almost anyone from our generation can relate to. Turning on the TV as a child, flipping through the channels, and eventually landing on a scene that you'd come to know well. A team of bright, color-coded heroes posing dramatically as an explosion sizzled behind them before leaping into action to defeat the giant villain of the week. Even today, when these team-based action shows have all but dried up, countless references are made to them in games and cartoons. But where did it all begin? What was the catalyst of the myriad of neon action heroes that fought for truth and justice in our childhoods? Have you ever heard of Gatchaman? You might recognize the name from the 2013 anime Gatchaman Crowds, but the true source material, Science Ninja Team Gatchman, has been around for decades. The anime, which begun its run in 1972, featured 5 bird-themed heroes who fought to protect the Earth from malicious alien forces. By now you've probably noticed that Gatchaman parallels Super Sentai aesthetics, and that's for good reason, as Gatchaman was the inspiration for the entire genre, including the Power Rangers of American media. Even though Gatchaman was never popular in the West, we can still see echoes of Gatchaman's influence everywhere in popular Japanese media, from Yukari's Featherman getup in the Persona Arena games, all the way to Pikachu's costume in Pokemon X and Y Pikachu the movie. Basically, anytime you see one of those bird beak visors, that's a Gatchaman reference.
When it came time to reboot the series in 2013, the big question was, how do we do it? Science Ninja Team Gatchman was pretty progressive for its time, discussing issues like conservation, environmentalism, and the responsible use of technology for the benefit of humanity. Those issues can still resonate with audiences today, but none more so than the matter of technology within our society. Gatchaman Crowds, the newest incarnation of the classic series, takes the issue of tech in our modern world to heart and tackles it in one of the most nuanced ways we've ever seen. That's why I think it's not really appropriate to call Gatchaman Crowds a reboot of the original series. Rather, it's more of an update. Crowds takes place in modern day and follows the exploits of 6 new Gatchaman. Gatchamen? Gatchamans? Anyway, with cool new powers and suits that are less like the original skin-tight supersuits and more like flashy mechs. Like the original, though, the Gatchaman and Crowds are tasked with protecting the planet Earth from malevolent aliens, and, on occasion, from humanity itself. The leader of the bunch is a mysterious alien named J.J. Robinson, who gives the G-Crew their missions in the form of vague, almost riddle-like forecasts of the future. With this sort of setup, you'd expect the series to take on a Monster of the Week style format, where the G-Crew head out and fight some random alien, learn its weaknesses, and inevitably save the day. Episode 1 even tries to lead the viewer on with this, introducing an alien menace known as Mess and showing our hero's first fight with it. But then something strange happens. The second episode shows this so-called alien menace quickly and permanently solved with some outside-the-box thinking and a friendly, communicative attitude. Crowds immediately subverts our expectations, showing us that this series will be telling an entirely different story from what we've come to expect from the hero genre, and priming us for what the true point of this iteration is. How communication and cooperation will be what ultimately saves the world in an increasingly digitized age.
Gotcha!
Instead of focusing on some alien empire and their weekly threats to mankind, the crux of Crowd's story is Rui Ninomiya, a young adult with a genius-level intellect and the social media network of his own creation, Galax. Galax is a smartphone app that has taken the nation by storm. It lets users design their own little avatars and meet with other users to talk about mutual interests. On the surface, it's really just a textbook social app, but Galax does have a few tricks up its sleeve. When signing up, users will enter in relevant information about themselves, their names, their hobbies, their skills, and their occupations. With this information on hand, Galax works to connect users when someone is in need. This can be something small, like a lawyer being connected to a woman struggling with legal issues, or it could be a far more serious matchup, like someone with formal first aid training being directed to someone who has recently been in an accident. Rui uses Galax not only to connect people all around the world, but also as a means of incentivizing selfless acts of kindness for the good of society. And the incentive isn't just warm fuzzies for knowing you've done good, it's points that are awarded to you within Galax, leveling up your avatar just like an RPG. It's the very definition of gamification, the application of game elements that encourage a specific action, in this case, altruism. A perfect example of Galax in motion is an episode where Rui finds out that a batch of spoiled milk has been sent to a school that a few members of the G crew are enrolled. All the Galax users at the school are notified of this, and the app creates a game out of stopping students and teachers from drinking any of this bad juice. The Galaxers get to have a fun, school-wide hunt for the milk, and in turn, Rui manages to minimize the harm that the spoiled milk would have done. And so, in a world where literal superheroes exist and are whispered about among civilians, the acts of heroism that normal people come together to achieve are the ones celebrated in the limelight. That's not what we've been conditioned to expect at all. Even with flashy CGI mecha costumes and extravagantly named attacks, the fight scenes are sparse. The show is more interested in examining how people interact with each other and technology than with bombastic action and flashy fights against the forces of evil. In fact, where are the forces of evil? Is Rui a shady figure trying to use social media to corrupt our youth? Is some sort of devious mastermind enslaving us to screens and slowly draining our souls via microtransactions? If that were the case, why does Rui seem so genuine when he speaks of his trust in humanity's potential to do good? It's because he really does mean it. Rui's goal is to update the world to one where everyone is empowered and altruism is the norm. He's a modern John Locke, asserting that humans ultimately care about and want to work towards the good of the community and themselves simultaneously, as the two are connected. His ideals do clash with the more traditional Gatchamans, who tend to side with the belief that the responsibility to help others should be left to an elite group, but that doesn't make him a villain. In fact, it can be easily argued that he's doing more good than they are. And yet, there's still conflict between him and the Gatchaman. It's never violent, it's a back and forth push of ideas with its basis in how the real world works and how times are changing. Gatchaman Crowds firmly invests in creating this dialogue about the world we live in and what kind of changes are genuinely possible in the connected 21st century. This is taken a step further when it is revealed that Rui is in possession of a note, the notebook-like device that allows the G crew to transform. With this note in hand, Rui can summon forth the titular Crowds, a mob of what are essentially giant electric babies that can be controlled either directly by Rui or by individuals that Rui has chosen. So using Galax, Rui creates his own personal task force of users he feels are the most selfless and most deserving of the Crowds. And when disaster breaks out, Rui calls upon these people to help. By giving the power directly to the people, Rui begins establishing the perfect world he's ideated for so long. A world in which there are no heroes like Gatchaman. Instead, every individual has the power to be their own hero. People help each other regardless of the situation. Big or small, they are there to help. Even with the dynamic impact Crowds users can create, Rui continues to push for the smaller good that Galax can do, recognizing that continuing to empower and connect those without Crowds is just as important. And on that note, it's time to examine series protagonist Hajime Ichinose, her use of Galax, and how her mindset is vital to all the underlying messages present in Crowds.
Hajime is a friendly, if not a little eccentric girl who has a passion for collecting stationery and using them to make collages. She also loves the Galax app and uses it as a means of connecting with people who share her interests. Early on we see the oddball, free-thinking Hajime bring Sugane, her stuffy senpai in both school and as a Gatchaman, to a collaging event she's organized via Galax. What seems at first to just be a bit of fun and cute interactions quickly becomes one of the most important scenes in the entire show. To understand why it's so vital, we need to take a quick look at Japan's society and language. Luckily, I happen to be studying this exact sort of thing in college. It likely comes as a surprise to no one that Japanese society tends to be a lot more formal and traditional than what we're used to in America, or Canada in Kyle's case. One incredibly important aspect of Japanese society is the expectation for one's everyday conduct to be polite and follow a set of unspoken rules. The basis of this lies in showing the appropriate level of respect to each person around you. You might be familiar with the use of suffixes on names like san, chan, and sensei. The suffix you use varies by the person's position, what your relationship to them is, and what situation you're speaking in. For example, you would follow your teacher's name with sensei, but your teacher's friend wouldn't. They'd be more likely to add san, or even drop the suffix altogether if they're close enough and the situation is very casual. If you don't know a person, you would default to san, as a base show of respect. Though popular in anime, suffixes like chan and kun aren't very common. They're only really used in regards to children, and using them can actually come off as very rude in the wrong situation. It can be like you're talking down to someone. Really, using the wrong suffixes in general can imply disrespect and land you in hot water. The entire Japanese language is built around being polite and showing respect, and this is why you should never try to learn Japanese from shonen anime. The boisterous leads of those types of shows tend to use very casual, and thus rude, speaking styles that would cause most native speakers to shake their heads in disapproval. Oh, did I forget to mention there are different speaking styles too? There are a whole bunch, in fact. Countless ways you can alter sentence structure and word choice to raise or lower your level of formality to correctly match the situation at hand. This is called keigo, and the word literally translates to respectful language. While we do have similar things that you can do in English, keigo is on super steroids compared to our own. It's incredibly important for anyone living in Japan to understand these unwritten rules and act accordingly. It's a major asset of how society has functioned there for a very long time. And now that we understand some of the rules about respect and formality in Japan, we can begin to understand why the collage meetup is so important. Hajime and Sugane represent very different sets of ideas. Sugane is traditional and formal, sticking to what he knows and what he's been taught is appropriate, including using almost exclusively polite speech patterns. Sugane's actions always line up with the previously discussed rules within society, and he gets anxious anytime anyone transgresses those rules, may it be by mistake or volition. But Hajime forsakes the rules of speech almost constantly. She treats everyone as an equal, addressing them not in a specifically rude way, but in friendly terms that could be considered lacking in respect. While Paimon and Sugane consider this to be a failing, Hajime's speech patterns are a part of the larger theme of how we relate to one another and view those foreign to us, something we can see illustrated beautifully at the meetup. Sugane isn't totally thrilled by the gathering. He doesn't see the point of it, and even wonders out loud if the people who had shown up were unemployed, because why else would they be wasting their time doing something so frivolous? Everyone has fun and converses like friends while sharing their creations. Hajime is well known and loved as the creator of these get-togethers. She's elated to weave through the crowds greeting everyone. She even has cute nicknames for some of the older attendees. But even amidst a cheerful atmosphere, Sugane still fails to see how this could appeal to anything more than the lowest common denominator. And then he realizes he's talking to the city's mayor and fire chief. He straightens up immediately, switching to an incredibly formal speaking style that you would be expected to use with such important officials. But Sugane's stuffiness is laughed off. This is a fun event. He should try to enjoy himself and not worry about formality or their positions in society relative to his own. Just cut some paper and have a good time, dude. That's what they're here for, and that's what he should do too. This is the atmosphere that Hajime has fostered. One where everyone is a person and a friend before a title. Everyone involved subscribes to the progressive idea that the social tradition of formality can be dropped here in favor of hosting an environment where everyone is on equal footing and able to converse casually in their free time, despite what their professional lives look like. The show really wants us to pick up on this idea of moving forward into a time where everyone is equal. It even has a highly diverse cast by Japanese standards. Rui cross-dresses, OD is gay, and berg-katze has no gender. Nothing anyone ever gets hung up on or questions. It's no surprise then that Hajime doesn't put herself above others just because she's a Gatchaman. She even makes the decision to reveal herself to the public, not only confirming the existence of the Gatchaman, but revealing her identity in the process. To Hajime, the Gatchaman don't need to be a secret group known only to the chosen and elite, but public information for those they serve. This is not just a total rejection of the rules placed upon her by her superiors within universe, but also a rejection of the tradition of Super Sentai-style stories that began with Gatchaman. And it's not her first time doing this. Time and again throughout the show's run, Hajime subverts our expectations and scraps the hallmarks of a superhero show. Her actions create a narrative that questions and critiques the MO of the entire genre, and every single time she seems to be focusing on one thing: communication. Hajime is never one to shoot first and ask questions later. When she sees a threat or someone acting aggressively, violence is never her first instinct. Not even the type of glammed-up superhero violence that those in her genre are allowed to enact in the name of keeping people safe or restraining a baddie. Instead, Hajime wants to understand why these actions are happening by communicating with the perpetrator. This is how she's able to put an end to the conflict with Mess, by trying to establish contact with the mysterious beings rather than just immediately assuming they're malevolent. Her victory really sets the pace for the entire series. Countless abductees are saved, and a long-running crisis is ended just by extending a friendly greeting. Hajime is a protagonist that embraces earnest connection and everything that comes along with it. Along with this, she adores Galax, not only for its social aspect, but for its ability to help people and do good as well. She knows that by teaming up with other users, she can enact change and help people. So then why does she so unflinchingly deny Rui's suggestion for her to quit being a Gatchaman? The answer is simple. Hajime understands that the amount of good Galax has the potential to do is directly balanced by the same amount of evil. As positive and great the app aims to be, it's still a social media outlet. We all know from our own lives exactly what kind of use and behavior can ruin a network meant to help people. Simple disagreements can turn into heated arguments at the drop of a hat. The barrier of space and screen embolden nasty, hostile actions and words that otherwise pleasant people would never let loose in the real world. Hateful and dangerous individuals can seek out the like-minded few and organize into threatening groups. It's something that happened when Crowds first aired, and it's something that's still happening today. Crowds is a show that understands how these things happen, and more specifically, how the advent of social media acted as a catalyst for many new problems that we still don't entirely know how to deal with. The world is rapidly changing, but as we keep pushing the limits of how far technology can go, we sometimes forget to keep it in check. With technology progressing too quickly for us to control it, a few bad eggs can turn the entire system sour.
Gotcha!
No character is more representative of this problem than series antagonist Berg-katze. Much like Rui and the rest of the Gatchaman, Berg is in possession of a note, which gives them the ability to shapeshift into other people. When taking someone else's form, Berg goes out of their way to cause as much chaos as possible, and once the deed is done, they can simply dissolve their appearance and walk away consequence-free, as Berg was never the one who committed the crime. Berg's shapeshifting is a metaphor. It's emblematic of the toxicity brought about by anonymity online. It should come as no surprise that when people are given the freedom to act while detached from their real self, the likelihood of them acting maliciously skyrockets. By obscuring their identity, they can create a barrier between themselves and the victim, skirting around consequences and alleviating any and all guilt they might feel had the conflict taken place in person. The root of this problem is the disconnection the digital age can make us feel. Even though we're all conscious of the fact that every username is symbolic of a real living person, words on a screen just don't register the same way someone physically present does. On the internet, we can't hear someone's tone or see their expression. We can't see the pain we might be causing people, and that makes it easier to be cruel, even over inconsequential things. Berg-katze takes this entire phenomenon a step further though, becoming the very embodiment of this toxicity. Their personality is vile and over the top, acting as if everything they do is some hilarious joke. Whenever the Gatchaman come to oppose Berg, not only do they completely stomp all over our heroes, but they actively mock them as well. Whether they be disguised as someone else or in their original form, they never fear the consequences of their actions, reveling in the chaos they can produce and the effects they can have, especially the negative ones. Even their design suggests a sort of anonymity, with their eyes constantly obscured by long burgundy hair. Coupled with a Cheshire Cat grin, viewers understand immediately the sort of provocative character they're dealing with. At their core, Berg-katze believes that humans are ultimately selfish and violent. Philosophically speaking, Berg is the Thomas Hobbes to Rui's John Locke. For the first couple of episodes, Berg-katze remains focused on smaller, isolated incidents. But around 3/4 through the first season, Berg takes on Rui's form and, as a result, takes control of Galax and the crowds. It's at this point that we begin to see the more negative effects Galax has on the public. The 100, a group of individuals that Rui deemed worthy of using crowds, is highly exclusionary, and as a result, creates more conflict than it solves. When someone wishes to use crowds for needs Rui deems too selfish, they lose the right to the ability. As the number of kicked members grow, so do the feelings of animosity towards Rui. When Berg-katze enters the equation, they capitalize on this hostility, giving crowds to those previously deemed unworthy and kicked from the upper echelon. This new group, the Neo 100, start creating chaos all across the city, not simply for the fun of it, but because their frustration and the echo chambers they've been dwelling in have radicalized them. These were people who genuinely wanted to change society for the better, but were told that their ideas were wrong and that they would no longer be allowed to have a hand in that change. They grow jaded and frustrated, It only takes a little push from Berg to send them over the edge. There's no real way to identify who's behind a given crowds, and the people in control of these big babies know that full well. Some just cause more minor inconveniences, but most decide to go big and use their unrestrained power to overthrow the current government, leaving destruction and debris in their wake. The important thing to note is that it's not necessarily a bad or incomprehensible plan. Throughout Crowds, we see that the current Prime Minister pretty much sucks at his job. He lacks any and all enthusiasm about the position, and as a result, people feel that he'll never take steps forward and change the flawed status quo. The Neo-100 represent a group of people who are ready to take action towards their goal, without considering the cost or ethics. They've become blinded by their vision of a better world, and their fear of losing power once again. In essence, they've become domestic terrorists. It's shocking that the Neo-100 emerged from a group that was originally hand-selected to change society through acts of assistance. But it's this same kind of thing that sadly happens in reality. If people feel marginalized enough, they can be swayed towards hateful ideologies that offer them community and give them a place to aim their anger. Paired with the detachment social media and the use of crowds gives them, they're willing to say and do much more extreme things than they ever would in person. This way of thinking backfires on the leader of the Neo-100, Koichi Umeda, when the wave of destruction caused by the crowds begins to directly impact him. As the attacks start to spread into the city where his wife and daughter live, he urges berg-katze to stop the crowds. For the first time since the attacks started, Umeda feels concerned about the actions of the Neo-100, and even if his reasons for realizing this are selfish, that doesn't invalidate his concerns. When confronted, Berg simply laughs and denies his request. If all of this didn't already hammer home the irony of this standoff, Umeda claims that Berg is the devil, to which they respond, "No, I am you." This is the crux of Berg's ideology and Galax's dark side. The unfortunate, casually selfish nature held by so many of its users. The vast majority of people are not altruists. When push comes to shove, self-preservation comes first. This isn't inherently evil, it's natural. But where's the cutoff? At what point will a given person stop serving others and instead serve themselves? Rui's goal from the beginning has been to push this line, extending the altruistic nature of Galax users. Yet by restricting the number of people using its ultimate trump card, the crowds, he created a divide. Giving the people what they want can lead to disaster, as berg-katze illustrated with the Neo-100, so what's the solution here?
Gotcha!
The answer to all these problems has been right in front of Rui, and by extension, the viewers, this whole time. When in use, the crowds are just an extension of our own bodies. They're larger, stronger, and far faster than the average human, but we're the ones in control. The question never needed to be, who's the most deserving of crowds? Rather, it should have been, how can I encourage people to do good with the crowds? The framework for this had already been laid out by Rui. It's the very basis by which people can access the crowd's ability. The answer, plain and simple, has always been Galax. Galax is highly accessible, available to anyone and everyone with a smartphone. Because of this, and the social media systems built into the app, it is a means of connecting people to one another on an equal field, building bridges rather than more barriers. The systems put in place by Rui work to actively encourage doing good deeds, and we've seen them lead to success time and again. If Galax can make regular people do the right thing, then what's to say that it can't do the same for people in control of the crowds? When Rui finally gets his note back and regains control of Galax, treating the crowds like an extension of Galax is the first thing he does. Rui removes all restrictions, allowing every single Galax user around the globe to manifest crowds. As new power brushes the fingertips of mankind, chaos initially breaks out, but, in the end, it works phenomenally. With just a little bit of guidance and a whole lot of trust, the general public proves that they can use crowds for good. Rui launches games targeting demographics with specific skills. Housewives, for example, are called upon to cook and package food en masse for those suffering from the previous crowds attacks. And once the ball is rolling, Rui finds that he doesn't even need to issue orders. Users themselves create games and ranking boards for hunting down and restraining the Neo-100 members. Everything the show has taught us has led up to this point. By breaking down the walls and creating a space where everyone is on even ground, you can then guide them to do right by society. First, people have to trust one another. Then, you can trust them to do the right thing. Unfortunately, there will always be outliers like berg-katze, people who thrive on conflict. But so long as you can trust the majority and eliminate restrictive glass hierarchies that divide, a peace can be established and maintained by the common man. So what of Berg then? Are we meant to just hope and pray that this monster of a person doesn't disturb the budding ideal society being established? Gatchaman Crowds offers another solution, and it all comes back to Hajime. Every member of the Gatchaman team feels some form of hate or fear towards berg-katze, all except Hajime Ichinose. In traditional Hajime fashion, she goes completely against the normal flow of things, and attempts to reason with Katze. Just like with the mess, Hajime doesn't want to use violence as a means of solving every problem. At the end of the day, she wants to make friends, so she kills them with kindness, consistently treating berg-katze like one of her friends. She willingly engages Berg, plays along with their banter, and constantly asks when she'll get to see them. Is she just ignoring all the harmful things that Berg has done, not just to the Gatchamaner team, but to the planet as a whole? Is this really the best course of action? Surprisingly enough, this is exactly what needs to be done to take Berg down. Berg, much like any toxic internet type, goes out of their way to do harm. They live for that feeling of power over others. But Hajime never lets Berg get to her. She actively denies them the satisfaction of hurting her, instead going as far as to invite them out on a date. It's in this final confrontation that Hajime manages to take down Berg once and for all. Not in some epic flashy battle, but by reducing them down to their base form. She cuts off Berg's hair, successfully stripping them of their anonymity and exposing them to everyone. Berg is now just as vulnerable as any given human, as Hajime. As they finally stand on equal ground, she absorbs Berg into her soul. Hajime realizes that, as intense as they might be, Berg is every one of us. We all hold a little bit of them inside our minds, that little voice urging us to hurt other people, to act out on base desires with flippant disregard for the humanity around us. But we rise above those impulses every day, because our capacity to do good overpowers the impulse to do evil. If Hajime can endure the overpowering negativity spewed by Berg, then can't all of us rise above our own base desires and be good to one another?
This is Gatchaman's ultimate, hopeful message for the modern age. We are living in an incredible world where technology has integrated itself into every facet of our lives, pushing us forward and connecting us like never before. Social media has the unique ability to remove us from our actions, while at the same time leaving us vulnerable with every facet of our lives on display to the world. There is a definite power in how connected we've become, but there are threats there too. Networks have become so astronomically large that it's impossible for us to depend on a few chosen moderators. We need to find a way to responsibly use the instantaneous connections at our fingertips and protect the peace as a community. This can't be brushed off simply by scoffing at the social use of technology. Like it or not, it's now an omnipresent staple of life. There is a part of us that exists online, a persona for sure, but still something rooted in our soul. With the advent of social networks, we've been handed incredible and terrifying tools that set us all on the same level, making us all equally available to anyone else in the world. Our culture is changing. The way we connect to each other is changing. Though we aren't walking hand in hand or sharing the same space, we're far from isolated. We're together like never before. We just need to remember that every username has a face, and they deserve to be treated the same as you would a person in the real world. Though circuits and electricity are what define our online avatars, we're still human, and we still have the human need for companionship, trust, and love. There's plenty in the world to go around. We just have to swallow our pride and remember to do right by others so they may do the same unto us. There will always be cruelty in the world, but that cruelty will always be matched, if not bested, by love. It's our duty to ourselves and others to update the way we see things and update the world. Hey there! So congrats on getting to the end of this video. I know it was a long one. We've been working on this for a while now, pretty steadily, and it's really nice to see it finish. So we hope you enjoyed the video and the analysis. If you have anything you'd like to add or any comments on what we've said, just leave it down below. We'll make sure to give it a read. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like, obviously. And if you want to see more analyses like this in the future, don't be afraid to subscribe to our channel. If you want to stay up to date on all of our videos and all the goings on with the channel, just go ahead and follow at DigiDreamClub on Twitter. We post announcements for new videos and occasionally post dumb jokes and memes, so if that's your cup of tea, go for it. Again, thank you so much for watching this whole video. We really appreciate it. Hope you have a nice day. Peace out.